Hello and welcome folks to Glorious Miniatures, and in today's video we are going to be painting up the Word Bearers, the first legion to fall to the ruinous powers of chaos way back in the day, before any of the other naughty chapters, or legions and for that matter. So hopefully up on the screen right now you'll see a bit of a turntable of the finished miniature should you follow my amazing techniques for painting. And without further ado, let's just get stuck into it. All right, there is what we're going to start off with the black primed miniature, starting off with Vorbak red. Now this, I don't know if it was me and I hadn't mixed it enough or I'd over thinned it, but as you will see, coverage for this initial layer was not great. So you can see it does dry and it does give us something for this second layer of paint to adhere to. And then we can start moving quite swiftly onwards. This, as I said before, this is all brushwork, folks. Obviously, apart from the first layer of paint, which is primed using a rattle can, it's all brushwork. You could use an airbrush, and I no doubt get a smoother finish sooner. But with just a little patience, it's always good to see what one is capable of. All right, folks, and here we've got the third coat going on now, as you can see. Once this coat is on, things can start really progressing, and obviously this is probably not ideal for army painting because it is a bit slow, but also on the other side one could just have a whole production line of maybe 10 miniatures at a time. By the time you finish the 10th miniature with the first coat of paint, you're ready to go back and start doing on second. As you can see, that third coat is now pretty, apart from that upper thigh bit there, which thankfully I managed to see at the last point. That lower leg is certainly looking somewhat nice and smooth. The little toe things are looking a bit weird, but thankfully we fixed that as well. Good catch, Badger. But here we go. As you can see, that smooth coat is on and ready to start doing the under armor using Skavenblight dinge. We are going to paint this color into the sort of all of the undersuit part, making sure we got good coverage over all the sort of wrinkly bits and all of the other bits and pieces. Couple of layers going to be needed probably, and then we can get moving on to the next part. All right, just going to get that inner kneecap bit. That is I sometimes forget this part, so make sure you get all the bits and pieces that are required with this color. All right, having gotten our second coat of paint on, we're going to leave that to dry for a couple of minutes before moving on to our next stage, which is of course Nuln oil. We're going to get this loaded up onto the brush and we're going to work it into the undersuit, making sure it gets into all of the wrinkles and things. It's going to be tinting the entire surface of the undersuit. So we want to get decent coverage and make sure some of the Nuln oil pulls up against the edges of the armor. Folks, we're also going to be using the Nuln oil to do the panel lining of this armor. So run it into all of the panel lines. We're not going to use it to tint the surface of the armor too much, so we will be coming back later to clean the little bit of excess up there in a bit. Make sure it gets into all the recesses. We do have to get that kneecap bit of our panel lining right there, and we can move on to the next stage once this is dried. All right, and Vorbak red again. We're going to use that to tidy up any excess bits of Nuln oil that escape from us. For example, we're going to get the top of that armor there. We're going to tidy up these panels on the upper thighs and also the feet where we went a bit crazy with the Nuln oil. Remember, the coverage of this paint when it's been thinned down is pretty terrible, so bear that in mind. But we can use that to tidy up this armor, get the top of the foot bit. All right, that's looking nice and tidied up. I reckon we're probably relatively good to go. Apart from the back of the boot. Terrible. We are going to get all this fixed up. All right, ready to go. And with Word Bearers red, this is going to be our chunky edge highlight. We are going to start by putting it on those weird toe things. Make sure we get a bit of sort of fat coverage on the end of the toes. I know they're not toes, but whatever they're called. We're going to do a very chunky edge highlight right there. And run it. Oh, there we go. Around this part of the lower leg armor right here. Nice edge highlight to begin with, and then we can increase that the fatness of the highlight. We're going to run it all around all the panel lines where possible. with the side of the brush, and then at some points you're just going to have to use the tip of the brush, but do that as the least amount of time as you can. Going back with a second highlight for all of these panel lines and edges. Go back and reinforce some of those edge highlights that you've done previously. Get a nice decent bit of saturation on this chunky edge highlight. And we're good to go to the next stage, which is of course, Wazdakka red. We're going to use the side of the brush to do our sort of very fine edge highlight. You can see the saturation of that red is pretty intense. So just make sure it's just the edge you're getting within that chunky previous layer. Work slowly around all of the edges and all of the panel lines, and we'll be set in a good place. Oh, that was a bit chunkier than intended. It's no big deal if you do that. You can always go back and go over it with the previous color just to tidy it up. Get the edges of those bits on the boot. And around the top of the foot. Etc, etc. Front of the leg armor. Yeah, that red is quite a bit brighter than the previous colors. Especially once you put a couple of layers down. A couple of decent edge coats later, and here we go. Probably missed a couple of little bits just for this video, but no doubt I'll fix it later. However, going back to the shoulder pad with Abaddon black. A couple of thin coats over this, and we are good to go. Gonna get both shoulder pads at this time. And don't forget to paint the underneath of the shoulder pad and the sort of inner edge, I guess. And we're also going to paint these shoulder strap things right here and the sort of central, whatever that thing is in the center, buckle. I decided we're going to paint all of that black. There we go, the underneath of those shoulder pads. In fact, that chest strap we're actually going to paint metal. I was very tempted to paint it black at one point. Wait for these layers of paint to dry. In fact, I think at this point I'm just going to paint the eye in as well. Ready for our sort of final stage. When we get around to it, just save us a bit of time while we have this paint out. Alright, Eshin Grey. Folks, this is the first of our two edge highlights. I suppose you could use a third edge highlight as well, even brighter than the next, like this color in the next one. But I just leave it at this stage. Well, the next stage, in fact. I take all that back. It's going to be a bit of a chunky edge highlight as per usual. Doesn't matter if it goes down too thickly. But get the sort of panel lines where you can. I like to do the edge highlight first using the side of the brush and then go around it again to make that chunkier edge highlight. So like that. So we get a good bit of decent opaque coverage down for setting us up for the final layer, the final edge highlight. As you can see, that rather fine edge highlight is now on over the entire shoulder pad. And it's at this point we come in and make that line a bit fatter, as you can see, with the tip of the brush just running it along the side just like that. So we're going to repeat that all the way around. We're going to do the other shoulder pad as well. All right, and now we're at the point where we do the crispy edge highlight using Dawnstone. As I said, you could add a further edge highlight where corners meet, etc. Potentially adding a bit of white to this color. But I'm not going to bother just for sort of line marine. It's just going to be these two edge highlights. This is the crispy one. We just want to run the side of the brush along the very edge, and that's all we're going to do. Maybe we do another coat if required. Hopefully not, though. All right, that's the edge highlights done there. Just remember, the paint does look brighter when it's wet. So wait for it to dry before you make an assessment if you require another layer. Did think we needed the second layer, so that's what we're doing right now. Get those last couple of edge highlights. All right, that's looking pretty good to me. Just repeat that on the other shoulder pad. And we can move on to the next stage, potentially, which is, of course, the metal stage. We're doing the Leadbelcher metal color over the shoulder strap things. We're also going to get around to doing all the rivets in this color as well. So try and be somewhat neat with this. Obviously, you can go back and tidy things up later, but not making a mess in the first place is probably the quicker method. We're going to get the shoulder pads, the shoulder straps Then we're going to start getting these rivets right here, as you can see. So I just sort of paint the very top, I guess, of them and then work my way around the entire rivet until it sort of meets the surface of the shoulder pad. It does take a bit of time, these things, but I find with a film on or something in the background, it's not too painful. And then, folks, we're going to be using Nuln oil. We're going to be using that to shade all of our metal parts. So, get that in focus. We're going to run that over the entire metal surface. We're not going to run it just into the sort of panel lines or whatever. We're going to tint the entire surface using this color. So cover the entire surface. Don't forget those rivets. We're going to do the rivet now. Yeah, so get the entire surface of the rivet. Make sure you've got a nice sort of ring of Nuln oil around the shoulder pad surface. Don't forget the back. Cover all of this surface here. Okay. Moving on to the eyes, we're going to use Caliban green. We are going to paint it. Hopefully I'm going to concentrate on just the one lens when I record this, although we'll see in a second. But we're going to work the very darkest color that we choose to use our lens. In this case, Caliban green, as I said. Okay, we're going to use the Caliban green on the lenses. Start from the center, working our way towards the outside of the helmet. I would like to leave a tiny area of black at the far edges of the lens to situate our white specular highlights at the end. But for now, so I'd say probably 3/4 of the width of the lens we want to paint green in this particular case. Once that first layer's dry, we're going to come back, give it another coat, and that'll set us up for our next color. That being Warpstone Glow, of course. Tend to paint these green lenses, usually the same method. So we're moving on. Probably half the width of that previous lens I usually aim for. This case, I don't know. I think it's about half. Just about. It's rather hard to tell, truth be told. And as always, it's personal preference on how bright you want these lenses to look. Once that first layer's dry, we're going to go back and do a second coat. Maybe that's actually more than half. And then we're going to move on to the dreaded Moot green. That is going to be the sort of inside corner of the lens. A further, I don't know, sort of half again of the previous width. If you do make any mistakes, you can always sort of go around later with a bit of black paint and run it around the edges. Then we're going to use White Scar. This is going to be our specular highlight on the very outside corner of our lens. Have to be quite quick because the paint dries up on the brush. As you can see, it didn't quite... There we go. You had to apply a fair bit of force. You saw how the bristles bent. So do be quick when using that before it dries out. And here is our finished miniature, folks. I'm pretty happy with how this looks in the end. I think the green eyes definitely work with the Word Bearers. We did that little green lens at the top, on top of the helmet, as you can see, with a bit of green. All of the black, the shoulder pads on the top of the backpack have been painted black, with the edge highlights have been the same. And the metal, we didn't bother actually highlighting any of the metal again. I was quite happy with it, like as a dulled down look. I thought it fitted in quite nicely with for the Word Bearers. And these reds really worked out, in my opinion. I'd love to paint some more Word Bearers at some point. There we go. Folks, thanks very much for hanging out with me today as we painted up this Word Bearer Marine. I must say I'm really enjoying this red, this tone of red. It's certainly not as vibrant as other legions, but that is not a bad thing. However, if you've made it this far, folks, without subscribing, please do consider subscribing. We are pushing on to 1,000 subscribers now. And if you could help out, that would be a fantastic thing. Share it on social media. Share it with your friends. Get them all to subscribe. All that kind of jazz. Just liking the video would be a fantastic thing. Anyway, without further ado, I will just end this video and say thank you very much and goodbye. So goodbye.